Hare Krishna and welcome everyone to our podcast. I am your host Chaitanya and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. We have a very special guest with us, Harivilas Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here to discuss such a profound topic.
The pleasure is all ours. Today we are diving into a fascinating book authored by Harivilas Das titled The Fourth Dimension. Specifically, we'll be exploring the very first chapter, which serves as an introduction to the fourth dimension. This chapter really sets the stage for a deep philosophical and spiritual journey. Before we delve into the specifics of the first chapter, could you give us a little background on the author, Hari Vilas Das, and what might have inspired him to write a book with such a captivating title?
It certainly does. The book opens with a concept that we can all immediately relate to: the world of three dimensions. It says, in this material world we live in length, width, and height, the three dimensions. But it immediately points out the limitation. These dimensions, our entire perceived reality, are limited by material time, space, and thought.
That's such a powerful starting point. We think of our world as so vast, but it argues it's fundamentally constrained. It mentions that while we can theoretically imagine something infinitely large or infinitely small, we can't actually experience it here. Our material bodies, subject to birth, growth, and death, preclude us from experiencing infinity.
Exactly. And this leads to a crucial question the book raises. How can humans even conceive of infinity if we can't experience it? The text suggests that this very ability to conceive of something infinite is a symptom of something beyond our material body. It's a symptom of the eternal soul.
So, our consciousness, which allows us to think of these boundless concepts, is actually a reflection of our true eternal nature as spirit souls. But the book says we are entrapped. How does this entrapment happen?
The entrapment occurs through misidentification. The eternal soul begins to misidentify with the temporary body and its limited consciousness. The soul is eternal, and as Lord Krishna confirms in the Bhagavad Gita, it states, that which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul.
So, there is this perplexing duality. The soul can experience eternity and infinity, but the material body, with its contaminated mind and intelligence, cannot. The book calls this a major obstacle to self realization.
Precisely. This misidentification is explained very clearly in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says, due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendent to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. This happens because of the false ego, which connects the pure soul to the temporary body.
It's described as a willful misstep that embroils one in an endless cycle of misery. This suggests a choice is involved. We choose to pamper the body and ignore the immortal soul and its true destiny.
Yes, and because of this, whatever happens to the body, birth, death, pleasure, pain, affects the soul due to ignorance. The real ego, the true identity, is to be the eternal servant of Lord Krishna, but the false ego wrongly identifies with the body.
So, if misidentification is the problem, what is the solution presented in this chapter? How do we find our way out of this three dimensional prison and into the fourth dimension?
The path forward is through achieving true peace of mind, which is essential for happiness. The book explains that this peace is impossible as long as the mind is plagued by lust, anger, and greed. To find that peace, Lord Krishna provides what the book calls the ultimate peace formula in the Bhagavad Gita.
This sounds like the core of the teaching. Can you break down this peace formula for us?
Certainly, it is based on accepting three fundamental principles of truth. The first is that Lord Krishna is the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities. The second is that he is the supreme lord of all planets and demigods. And the third is that he is the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities.
Let's look at that first truth. Krishna is the ultimate beneficiary. The book mentions that when we try to be the master of material possessions with a mentality of domination, we become hopelessly entangled. How does that relate?
It relates directly. The book explains that since Lord Krishna is the owner and enjoyer of everything, if a person refuses to accept this fact, he becomes like a thief who tries to usurp the property of God. And the thief can never have real peace of mind. He is always anxious. By trying to be the enjoyer, we put ourselves in a position of anxiety and suffering.
That's a very clear analogy. So, recognizing Krishna as the supreme enjoyer is the first step toward peace. What about the second truth, that he is the supreme lord of all planets and demigods?
This truth helps us understand our actual position. The book quotes Srila Prabhupada, who explains that under the spell of illusion, we are trying to be lords of all we survey, but actually we are dominated by the material energy. Real peace comes when we understand our actual position. Lord Krishna is the supreme predominator, and all living entities, including the great demigods, are his subordinates. Accepting this reality frees us from the struggle for control.
It's a shift from being a frustrated controller to a peaceful subordinate. I can see how that would bring relief. This leads us to the third truth, that Krishna is the benefactor and well wisher of all living entities. This one feels very personal and comforting.
It is. The Katha Upanishad states that the one Supreme Lord is supplying the necessities of life for the many other living entities. He maintains everyone. But more than that, he actively helps his devotees. He reveals himself progressively as a devotee surrenders to him. As he says in the Gita, "As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly."
So it's a reciprocal relationship. The more we turn to him, the more he reveals himself and guides us from within. The book mentions that he gives the understanding by which we can come to him.
Yes, this is not just academic knowledge. It's a living, dynamic process. By making a serious effort to hear about the Lord and serve him, Krishna takes a special interest and opens the doors of knowledge from within our hearts. This is the path to freeing ourselves from illusion and cultivating our eternal relationship with him.
This has been a very illuminating discussion. To summarize, this first chapter of The Fourth Dimension takes us from understanding our confinement in the material world of three dimensions to recognizing our true nature as eternal souls. It identifies the root of our suffering as the misidentification with our temporary bodies.
And most importantly, it lays out the clear path to liberation through the ultimate peace formula. Understanding and accepting our true eternal relationship with Lord Krishna as the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor, and our supreme well-wisher. This understanding is the very entrance into the fourth dimension of spiritual reality.
A perfect conclusion to our discussion on this foundational chapter. Harivilas Prabhu, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. Hare Krishna.
and thank you to all our listeners for joining us. We hope you'll continue this journey with us as we explore more profound spiritual truths. Until next time, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna and welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of Spiritual Dimensions. I am your host, Chaitanya. Today, we are deeply honored to have Harivilas Prabhu with us, the author of the insightful book, The Fourth Dimension. Welcome, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya. It's a pleasure to be here and discuss these important topics with you and your audience.
We are diving into chapter 2 of your book titled Entrapment in the Material World. It's a powerful chapter that gets to the very root of a question many people ask: why is there suffering? Your book starts by addressing a core issue, a fundamental mistake we make in identifying who we are. Could you elaborate on that?
Certainly, the foundational error, the one from which all other miseries spring, is the misidentification of the self with the temporary material body. We are, by our eternal nature, spiritual beings, the soul or Atma. However, we have come to believe that we are this body of flesh and bone. This mistake constrains our true potential for self-realization and blocks our path back to the realm of immortality. The text describes this as a willful misstep. It's not just an accident. There's an element of choice in ignoring our spiritual identity. We choose to pamper the body, cater to its endless demands, and in so doing we ignore the immortal soul within and its true eternal destiny. This choice, unfortunately, embroils us in an ending cycle of misery.
You also mentioned that atheists, in particular, are limited by this bodily confinement because they adamantly rebuff spiritual knowledge. Can you expand on why this specific viewpoint is highlighted as being so constricting?
Yes, the atheistic or purely materialistic viewpoint is the epitome of this bodily identification. If you believe that you are simply a product of chemical reactions and that consciousness ceases to exist when the body dies, then you are confined entirely to the limitations of that mortal body. There is no possibility of seeking an eternal, blissful life beyond it. By rejecting the spiritual knowledge given by great mentors like Lord Krishna, one essentially locks the door to their own freedom and accepts the specter of death as the final end. But our actual destiny is to transcend death and re-enter the spiritual world.
That's a very clear explanation. In the book, you provide a precise description of this entrapment from the Srimad Bhagavatam, citing a very specific and powerful verse. Could you share that with us and perhaps break it down?
Of course, the verse is from the first canto, 7th chapter, verse 5. It states, Yaya samohito jiva, atmanam trigunatmakam, paro apimanute, anartham, tatkritam chabiphadyate. The translation is, due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product, and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. This one verse is incredibly profound. It explains everything. The term ya samohito jiva means that the living entity is bewildered by an external energy. This energy, Maya, makes us forget our true nature. Even though we are paro, or transcendental, we begin to think of ourselves as a triguna atmakam, a product of the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance.
So, our suffering is not inherent to us, to the soul itself, but is a reaction that we undergo because of this mistaken identity. The soul itself is above it all.
Exactly. The eternal soul is not subject to suffering, birth, death, time, or karma. These are all properties of the material world and the material body. The soul only suffers when it mistakenly identifies with the body. It's like dreaming. In a dream, you might be chased by a tiger and feel immense fear. Your heart races, you sweat. The fear is real. But upon waking, you realize the tiger never was there. The suffering was due to your identification with the dream body. Similarly, our material suffering is due to our identification with this temporary physical body.
That's a fantastic analogy. You then go on to explain how this connection between the completely different soul and body happens. You pinpoint something called the subtle false ego. What is that?
The false ego, or ahankara, is the mechanism of this misidentification. It's the subtle knot that ties the spirit soul to the material body. It's the voice that says, I am this body. I am American. I am a man. I am a doctor. I am young. I am old. All of these are temporary bodily designations. Because of this false ego, whatever happens to the body, illness, praise, insult, aging, we think it is happening to us, the soul. This is the state of ignorance.
And the book contrasts this with the real ego. So, having an ego isn't inherently bad, it's a matter of what it's fixed upon.
Precisely. Ego simply means I am. The problem is the false ego, which says I am this body. The real ego, the pure spiritual identity, is Aham Brahmasmi. I am spirit. And in its complete form, it is the understanding that I am the eternal servant of Lord Krishna. When the ego is purified and redirected towards our true eternal function, it becomes the source of boundless joy instead of misery.
This brings us perfectly to the end of the chapter, where you present the solution through the example of Arjuna and Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. How does their interaction on the battlefield of Kurukshetra illustrate this entire process of liberation?
Arjuna is the perfect example of a soul suffering due to bodily identification. He sees his relatives, his grandfathers, his teachers, his cousins on the opposite side of the battlefield, and is overcome with lamentation. He says, how can I fight them? They are my family. He is thinking in terms of these temporary bodily relationships. His apprehension and grief are profound. Lord Krishna's entire instruction in the Bhagavad Gita is designed to lift Arjuna from this platform of false ego to the platform of real ego. He begins by explaining that the soul is eternal and cannot be slain. He distinguishes between the body and the self, and ultimately, he reveals the path to true freedom and happiness.
And what is that path? How do we attain that boundless happiness you speak of?
The path is to become conscious of Lord Krishna. It is to cultivate our eternal loving relationship with the Supreme Lord. This process, known as Bhakti Yoga, is what purifies the false ego and reestablishes us in our true identity. By understanding that we are eternal servants of Krishna, our actions are no longer motivated by selfish bodily desires, but by a desire to please the Supreme. This shift in consciousness is what frees us from the reactions of material miseries and opens the door to an endless, ever-increasing ocean of spiritual joy.
That's a very inspiring message, Prabhu. But for someone new to these concepts, the idea of becoming conscious of Lord Krishna might seem very abstract. How does one practically begin this journey of bhakti yoga in their day to day life? What are the first steps one should take to bridge the gap between this profound philosophy and their day to day reality?
That's an excellent and crucial question. Philosophy is meant to be lived, not just discussed. The bridge from theory to practice in bhakti yoga is built on a foundation of simple yet powerful daily activities. The first and most important step is chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is not a mere ritual, it's a direct conversation with the Supreme Lord. The sound vibration of this mantra is transcendental, meaning it descends from the spiritual platform. When we chant, we are cleansing the mirror of the heart, wiping away the dust of material misidentification that has accumulated over countless lifetimes. It's recommended to chant a specific number of rounds on a string of 108 beads known as japa beads. This regular practice, especially in the quiet morning hours, establishes a strong spiritual foundation for the day. It's like charging your spiritual battery. You don't need to understand it fully at first. The purifying effect is automatic. Just as fire will burn you, whether you understand its chemical properties or not, the Mahamantra will purify your consciousness regardless of your intellectual grasp. This is the most accessible and sublime method for this age. It costs nothing, requires no prior qualification, and can be practiced by anyone, anywhere, at any time. It is the most direct way to experience the spiritual reality we've been discussing. Alongside this, one can begin to engage their senses in a spiritual way. Instead of listening to mundane news or materialistic music, one can listen to talks about spiritual life or devotional songs. This is called shravanam, or hearing. By hearing from authoritative sources, our faith and understanding deepen. The ears are the primary vehicle for receiving transcendental knowledge. What we allow into our minds through our ears has a profound effect on our consciousness. So filling that channel with spiritual sound is a transformative practice. It gradually attunes our mind to a higher frequency, making it easier to remember Krishna throughout the day. These two practices, chanting and hearing, are the cornerstones of bhakti yoga. They are the starting point, the core of the process. They don't require you to renounce your family or your job. They are practices that can be integrated into any lifestyle. They are the practical means by which we begin to shift our consciousness from the temporary body to the eternal soul. It is a gradual but certain process of awakening.
Welcome, listeners, to the Fourth Dimension Deep Dive. I'm your host, Chaitanya.
And I am Harivilas Das. It's a pleasure to be with you all again as we continue our journey through my book, The Fourth Dimension.
Today, we are exploring a topic that is universally sought after, yet so elusive for many: peace of mind. We'll be diving into chapter 3 of the book, which lays out a profound, time tested formula for achieving genuine, lasting peace.
Indeed, the chapter opens with a pivotal verse from the Bhagavad Gita, 5.29, which is often called the ultimate peace formula. It's the foundation for everything we'll discuss today.
Yes, let me read it for our listeners. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. That's a very powerful statement. Could you break that down for us, Harivilas Prabhu?
Certainly, Lord Krishna presents three fundamental truths here. The first is that he is the ultimate beneficiary, the supreme enjoyer of all our actions, all our sacrifices, and all our efforts. In Sanskrit, the term is bhaktaram.
So, this immediately challenges our default position, which is to think, I am the enjoyer, I am working for my own benefit, my own pleasure.
Exactly. This misconception is a primary source of our anxiety. The second truth is that he is Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, the Supreme Lord or controller of everything, of all planets and all the demigods who manage the universe. This addresses our deep-seated desire to control our environment, our lives, and others.
A desire which is constantly frustrated because ultimately we control very little.
Precisely. And the third truth is that he is Suhridam Sarva Bhutamam, the benefactor and ultimate well-wishing friend of every single living being. This is incredibly comforting. It means the Supreme Controller isn't a tyrant or indifferent. He is our best friend, always looking out for our true welfare. So,
Understanding these three things, that God is the supreme enjoyer, the supreme controller, and our supreme friend, is the key to unlocking peace.
yes, because when we understand this, we stop fighting reality. We stop trying to usurp positions that are not ours. And in that surrender of the false ego, we find shantim, or peace.
That's a very counterintuitive point for many of us, Harivilas Prabhu. The idea of not being the primary enjoyer of our own work. Could you offer an analogy to help us understand how giving up that mentality leads to peace? The chapter connects this search for peace directly to the state of our mind. It quotes another Gita verse, Ashantasya kutaha sukham. How can there be any happiness without peace? This seems obvious, but we often chase happiness while completely neglecting the inner peace that is its prerequisite.
And the battleground where peace is won or lost is the mind itself. The Gita, in chapter 6, verse 6, makes a stark declaration. For one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy.
And you can't have peace if you're living 24/7 with your worst enemy right there between your ears. That enemy, the uncontrolled mind, is constantly agitating us with material desires, ambitions, fears, and frustrations.
It completely thwarts any attempt at self-realization or higher purpose. So the question then becomes, what is it that makes the mind our enemy? What are the forces that keep it in a state of turmoil?
The chapter identifies the primary culprits as a trio: lust, anger, and greed. Can you explain how these three are interconnected?
They form a destructive chain reaction. It begins with lust, which in this context means any strong material desire to enjoy something for oneself. We try to satisfy that lust, but the material world is designed in such a way that our desires can never be fully or permanently satisfied.
And that leads to frustration.
Exactly. And from that frustration, anger is born. We become angry at the obstacles, at other people, at our circumstances, even at God. And from that anger, greed emerges, an insatiable desire for more and more, thinking that if only I had more, I could finally satisfy my lust and overcome my frustration.
So these three, lust, anger, and greed, become dictators of the mind, as the book says, leading to nasty thoughts and destructive behavior. They are the engine of mental agitation.
And they all stemmed from that initial illusion we discussed, the illusion that I am the enjoyer and I am the controller. Under this cloud of illusion, a person tries to be the master of material possessions and people.
This mentality of domination.
Yes, and with that mentality, one becomes hopelessly entangled in the grip of material nature and its law of karma. Every action, driven by a desire to dominate and enjoy, creates a reaction, forcing us into a cycle of repeated suffering.
This leads to a really striking and important point in the chapter, the idea of being a thief. How does trying to be the owner and enjoyer make someone a thief in the spiritual sense?
The logic is very clear. If Lord Krishna is the true owner and enjoyer of everything, as established in the peace formula, then anyone who refuses to accept this fact and tries to usurp God's property for their own enjoyment is, by definition, a thief.
The book quotes brother verse from the Gita 3.12 to elaborate on this. It says the demigods, who are in charge of life's necessities like rain, sun, and fertile earth, will supply these things when they are satisfied by our yajna or sacrifice. But one who enjoys these gifts without offering them back in return is certainly a thief.
This is a crucial point. The demigods are described here as the supply agents of the Supreme Lord. They don't own the resources of nature, they manage them on behalf of the Supreme Proprietor, Maheshvara. So everything we receive, our food, our air, our water, our talents, is a gift.
And to take a gift without permission, or at least without thanksgiving, without gratitude, is stealing.
It makes one an ungrateful thief. And by the law of karma, a thief must suffer. But there's a more immediate psychological consequence which is directly related to our topic of peace, which is, a thief can never have peace of mind. A thief is always anxious, always looking over his shoulder, afraid of being caught and punished. He's afraid of losing what he has stolen.
So, as long as we maintain this thief mentality, believing we are the proprietors of our bodies, our possessions, our families, we will live in a constant state of underlying anxiety because we know deep down that it can all be taken away at any moment. We can't be peaceful.
That's the core of the problem. Our lack of peace is a direct symptom of our false claim to proprietorship. We are living with stolen property, and the mind of a thief is never, ever at rest.
So it all comes back full circle to where we started. The solution, the ultimate peace formula, is to give up this thief mentality and embrace the three truths presented in Bhagavad Gita 5.29.
Yes, let's summarize them one more time. First, we must understand that God, Krishna, is the true enjoyer of the fruits of our labor. We are not the beneficiaries. Our fulfillment comes from serving the whole, not just our isolated part.
Second, we must accept that He is the supreme owner and controller of everything. We are not in charge, we are caretakers at best. Acknowledging this relieves us of the immense burden of trying to control the uncontrollable.
And third, and most importantly, we must know that this supreme controller is not a distant dictator, but our dearest, most well-wishing friend. He is always guiding us toward what is truly best for us. Trusting in this friendship removes fear and anxiety.
It's a complete paradigm shift, moving from a self centered view of the world to a God centered one. And according to this ancient wisdom, that is the only platform upon which real, unshakable peace of mind can be built.
It is the end of the war against reality. When the war ends, peace naturally follows. By accepting these principles, we align ourselves with the truth of our existence, and that alignment is the very definition of peace.
A profound and beautiful conclusion. Thank you, Harivilas Prabhu, for guiding us through the deep insights of Chapter 3, Peace of Mind.
My pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on the Fourth Dimension Deep Dive. We encourage you to reflect on this peace formula in your own life. Join us next time as we continue our exploration. Until then, be well. Hare Krishna and welcome to Vedic Vision. I'm your host Chaitanya. Today we are delving into a foundational spiritual truth, the concept of Krishna as the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities. It's an idea that can fundamentally shift our perspective on our actions, our lives, and our purpose. To help us unpack this profound topic, I am joined by Harivilas Prabhu. Prabhu, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Chaitanya. It's a pleasure. This concept is central to understanding our place in the cosmos. In simple terms, everything we do, every effort we make, every sacrifice we perform, ultimately finds its true recipient in the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Think of it like a massive corporation. You have many departments, sales, marketing, production, and they all work diligently. They generate revenue and achieve successes. But where does the final profit go? It goes to the owner, the CEO. They are the ultimate beneficiary of all the distributed efforts. In the same way, all cosmic activities and our personal endeavors are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme.
That's a helpful analogy, Prabhu. It clarifies the structure. But in a corporation, the CEO's benefit can sometimes feel exploitative to the workers. How does this analogy hold up when we consider the loving, reciprocal nature of our relationship with the Supreme? That's a very clear corporate analogy. It makes the hierarchy of it easy to understand. But could you give us a more organic or natural analogy, something that speaks to the cosmic system itself?
Certainly. The most natural analogy is the cosmic cycle itself. The material creation is not static. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It follows a grand cycle of appearance, maintenance, and disappearance, all under divine will. Lord Krishna describes this in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 8. He says, Prakritim svam avasthabhya visrijami punah punah bhutagramam imam kritnam avasham prakriter vashat. The whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again, and under my will, it is annihilated at the end.
That's a powerful statement of divine control. Could you break down some of those Sanskrit words for us? What is that deeper significance?
Of course. Prakritim svam means my own nature, or my material energy. Krishna is not separate from his energy, but he is always in control of it. Visrijami punah punah means I create again and again. The word visrijami implies an effortless release, like exhaling. It's not a laborious task for him. The whole creation emanates from his will, exists under his will, and is withdrawn by his will. It shows his complete and effortless mastery.
And what about us, the living entities, during these vast cosmic cycles of creation and annihilation? Where do we go?
That's addressed in the previous chapter in verse 8.19. Krishna explains that the living entities are also part of this cycle. He says, Puta gramas sa evayam, putva putva praliyate. Again and again, the multitude of beings comes into existence and is helplessly annihilated. We cycle between two states, the manifested or vyakta, when we have a physical body and are active in the created world, and the unmanifest or avyakta, when the cosmos is dissolved and we remain dormant within the Lord's transcendental body, awaiting the next creation. Our souls are eternal, but our material bodies are temporary and subject to this cycle.
So, if we are eternally caught in this cycle of manifest and unmanifest states, what is the purpose of it all? Why was the material world created in the first place?
The scriptures explain that the material world is a place for rehabilitation. It's for those souls who, exercising their free will, have turned away from their loving relationship with God. Krishna creates this world to give us a chance to try and enjoy separately from Him. But He knows that ultimately true happiness cannot be found here. The inevitable frustrations of birth, old age, disease, and death are built into the system to encourage us to seek something more, to reawaken our original spiritual consciousness.
That's a very powerful and sobering story. It really puts our material attachments into perspective. But Maharaja Khatwanga was a king, a great warrior. His sacrifices and duties were on a grand scale. What about the common person? For someone who's not a monarch or a great ascetic, how does this principle of sacrifice for the supreme manifest? Are there different kinds of sacrifices?
An excellent and very practical question. Lord Krishna addresses this directly in the Bhagavad Gita. He explains that there are many types of sacrifices, and they aren't all about grand fire rituals. He speaks of dravya yajna, the sacrifice of one's possessions, which is what we commonly think of as charity. Then there is tapo yajna, the sacrifice of undergoing voluntary austerities for a higher purpose. There is also yoga yajna, the sacrifice of practicing the mystic yoga system. He also mentions swadhyaya jnana yajnaha, the sacrifice of studying the Vedas and cultivating knowledge. The beauty of the system Krishna lays out is its universality. Everyone, regardless of their position, can perform sacrifice.
So the principle is the same, even if the expression is different. It's about offering what one has, one's own energy and resources, in a mode of devotion. But with all these different types of yajnas, is there one that is considered most suitable, especially for our current age, the age of Kali?
That story is a powerful lesson on the superiority of eternal liberation over any temporary gain. But how can we cultivate that kind of clarity in our own lives when we're surrounded by constant demands and distraction? By keeping the ultimate goal in sight through regular spiritual practice. Hearing such stories, studying Scripture, and associating with those who share these values helps us remember what is truly important. Like Khatwanga, we must develop the vision to see that everything in this material world is temporary, and that its best use is in service to the eternal. And this brings us back to our starting point and the conclusive statement from Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 24. This verse leaves no room for doubt. He says, Aham hi sarva yajnanam, bhuktacha prabhu evacha, natumam abhijananti tatvenatas chavanti te. I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down.
Could you elaborate on the words bhokta and prabhu? What do they mean here?
Bhokta means the ultimate enjoyer. Just as the stomach receives and distributes nourishment to the whole body, Krishna is the ultimate recipient and enjoyer of all energies. Prabhu means the supreme master or proprietor. Everything belongs to him. He is the owner of all that is. And the verse says that those who don't understand this reality fall down. What does that mean? It means they miss the entire point of the spiritual process. They may perform pious acts or religious rituals, but if they don't understand that Krishna is the ultimate goal and beneficiary, they remain entangled in the material world, falling back into the cycle of birth and death, unable to attain the eternal life that only Krishna, who is also known as Mukunda, the giver of liberation, can grant.
So, as we conclude, what is the key takeaway for our listeners? How can they apply this profound understanding in their daily lives to find more meaning and purpose?
The practical application is a shift in consciousness. Whatever you do, your work, your family duties, your charity, your creative pursuits, do it with the awareness that you are an agent, but the ultimate beneficiary is the Supreme. Mentally offer the fruits of your labor to Him. This transforms action, or karma, into devotion, or bhakti. It frees us from the anxiety of success or failure and connects every part of our life to the divine, filling it with profound purpose and leading us towards eternal freedom.
A beautiful and practical conclusion. Harivilas Prabhu, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Hare Krishna.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on Vedic Vision. Until next time, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, and welcome, dear listeners, to our continuing discussion on the book The Fourth Dimension by Harivilas Das. I am your host Chaitanya, and I am here again with Harivilas Prabhu to delve deeper into the fundamental truths of spiritual reality. Today, we're exploring the second truth presented in the book, a concept that is foundational to achieving peace. Krishna is the supreme lord of all planets and demigods. Prabhu, thank you for being with us.
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya. It's a pleasure to be here. This second truth is indeed crucial. It centers on the statement from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 29, where Lord Krishna is described as Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. This Sanskrit term means that Krishna is the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, the ultimate proprietor and controller of everything in existence.
That's a very powerful and absolute statement. The book correlates understanding this fact with the attainment of real peace. Could you elaborate on how knowing Krishna as the supreme controller leads to peace? Many might not see the immediate connection.
Certainly. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada explains this connection beautifully in his purport to this verse. He says that we, the conditioned souls, are all anxious for peace in the material world, but we don't know the formula for it. The formula is simple. Lord Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. He is the proprietor of all planets and the demigods thereon. The anxiety and lack of peace come from a fundamental misunderstanding. Under the spell of illusion, we living entities are trying to be lords of all we survey. We want to be the controllers, the proprietors, the enjoyers. But in reality, we are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. He is the master of material nature, and we are under its stringent rule. So real peace is unattainable, either individually or collectively, until we understand this bare fact. Lord Krishna is the supreme predominator, and all living entities, including even the greatest demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, are his subordinates. Perfect peace is only found in complete Krishna consciousness.
So, it's a fundamental shift in consciousness from me, the enjoyer, to Krishna, the enjoyer. It's about letting go of that false sense of lordship that causes so much friction and anxiety. The Vedas must be filled with confirmations of this principle.
They are. For example, the Shweta Upanishad describes the Supreme Lord as Tam Ishwaranam Paramam Maheshwaram, which means he is the supreme controller of all other controllers. And beyond that, Lord Krishna himself confirms his position throughout the Bhagavad Gita. That's a very important point. Various Vedic statements like Sarvam Hi Etad Brahma from Mandukya Upanishad establish that everything is Brahman. Brahman refers to the total manifest material creation. The principle is that the effects, which are the differently manifested things we see in the world, are non-different from their cause. And the cause of everything is the Supreme Brahman, Lord Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, verse 3, Krishna says, Mama Yonir Mahat Brahma, meaning the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth.
The purport explains this further, speaking of the Mahatattva, or the total cosmic manifestation. It describes the Supreme Personality impregnating the substance. It seems to be a very detailed scientific description of creation.
Yes, it is. Srila Prabhupada explains that everything takes place due to the combination of the body, which is the field of activities or kshetra, and the spirit soul, the knower of the field or kshetrajna. This combination is made possible by the Supreme Lord himself. The Mahat Tattva, or the total substance of the material cause, is sometimes called Brahman. The Supreme Personality, Krishna, impregnates that Brahman with the seeds of the living entities, and from this innumerable universes become possible. In simpler terms, everything in existence, both in material and spiritual worlds, is a byproduct of Lord Krishna's diverse spiritual energies. Nothing exists independent of him.
This idea that nothing is independent and everything is owned by the Lord is beautifully captured in the Isopanishads' first mantra, which the book highlights next. It seems to take this profound philosophy and make it very personal and practical.
Exactly. The mantra states, Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam, Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha, Ma Gridhaha Kasya Swidhanam. The translation is, everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. It's a direct prescription for a peaceful life. Understand that nothing is truly yours. Accept your quota, what is necessary for your maintenance, and don't covet more, because you are not the proprietor. This principle, if applied, would solve so many of the world's problems which stem from greed and envy.
To clarify this further, the chapter breaks down Krishna's energies into two categories: the inferior energy, or apara prakriti, and the superior energy, para prakriti. Could you explain this distinction for our listeners?
Certainly. The Supreme Lord is the energetic source. His inferior spiritual energy, apara prakriti, is the material creation. This includes the gross elements like earth, water, fire, and air, as well as the subtle elements like mind, intelligence, and false ego. It's considered inferior because it is temporary in its manifestation. It appears and then disappears. The superior energy, para prakriti, is the living entity, the spirit soul, the organic energy. It is superior because it is eternal and conscious, just as the Lord is. It is always manifest in the spiritual world. Both these energies emanate from the Lord, and He is the ultimate controller of everything. That's the critical question. When living entities misuse the material facilities provided by the Lord for their own selfish purposes, they infringe on the laws of nature. This infringement results in negative karmic reactions and suffering. Even if one makes offerings to the Lord, but does so with the hidden desire to enjoy the fruits of that labor as the primary beneficiary, they still receive karmic reactions, good or bad, that keep them bound within the material world of repeated birth and death. It really brings us full circle to the very beginning of our discussion. The formula for peace is to understand the Supreme Proprietor and act in accordance with that truth, to use everything in His service. Precisely. The entire material nature is controlled by Him. The core truth of this chapter is that Lord Krishna is Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He is the Supreme Proprietor and Controller. Everything material and spiritual originates from Him. True lasting peace can only be found when we understand this profound reality and align our lives with it, using everything not for our selfish enjoyment, but for the pleasure of the Supreme Enjoyer, Lord Krishna. Prabhu, that's a very clear conclusion. But for many of us living in the modern world, the idea of using everything for Krishna can seem abstract. Could you provide some practical, everyday examples of how one might apply this principle of tena tektena bunjita, enjoying one's quota, in a tangible way? Harivilas Prabhu, thank you so much for guiding us through this incredibly deep and important topic. Your explanations have made these complex ideas much clearer. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. We hope this discussion has given you much to reflect upon. Please join us next time as we continue our journey through the fourth dimension. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, and a very warm welcome to all our listeners. I'm your host, Chaitanya, and this is our continuing podcast series exploring the profound wisdom of the book, The Fourth Dimension. We are incredibly fortunate to be joined again today by the author himself, Harivilas Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya. Thank you for the kind welcome. It's always a joy to discuss these topics. Today we delve into Chapter 6, which addresses a truly foundational and comforting truth. Krishna as the well-wisher of all living beings. It's a concept that, once understood, can completely reframe our perspective on life and our place in the universe.
That's a powerful statement. To establish this truth, the chapter first lays the groundwork by defining Krishna's role in the material creation. It begins with a very significant verse from the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, it's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 10. Lord Krishna declares, Mayad yakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kunteya jagat viparivartate. The translation is, this material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again.
So, this verse establishes Krishna as the supreme overseer. The material world, with all its complexities, isn't acting randomly. It's one of his energies working under his direction. But the verse also describes this world as being created and annihilated again and again. This cyclical nature can seem impersonal, even harsh. How does this fit with the idea of a personal well wisher?
That's a very important point. The material world functions according to strict laws, much like a complex machine. Krishna designs and empowers it, but he remains aloof from its direct working. The text clarifies that although he is the creator, owner, controller, and even the seed giving father of all beings, he is not responsible for our entanglement here. Our suffering within this cycle of birth and death, or samsara, is due to our own choices, the misuse of our limited free will.
Can you give us an analogy for that? How can the creator not be responsible for the experience of the creation?
Think of the government that builds roads and establishes traffic laws. It provides the facility for everyone to travel. If a driver chooses to ignore the speed limit or run a red light and gets into an accident, is the government responsible for their injuries? No. The driver is responsible for misusing the facility provided. Similarly, the Lord provides this material world and a portion of free will. Our choices dictate our entanglement. His role as a well-wisher is demonstrated by the fact that he doesn't just leave us here. He provides the traffic laws for spiritual life, the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, to guide us safely back home.
That's a very clear analogy. So his compassion is shown in providing the way out. This leads us to the core message of the chapter: Krishna as the ultimate benefactor. The book cites a verse from the Katha Upanishad to support this.
Yes, it's a beautiful verse that highlights our relationship with the Supreme. Nityo nityanam chaitana chaitananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman. This translates as, the Supreme Lord is eternal, and the living entities are eternal. The Supreme Lord is cognizant, and the living entities are cognizant. The difference is that the Supreme Lord is supplying all the necessities of life for the many other living entities.
This is fascinating. It says we are qualitatively the same as God. We are eternal spirit souls, we are conscious beings, but there is a quantitative difference. He is the one singular provider, and we are the many, the beneficiaries.
Precisely. And how does he provide? He maintains us according to our activities and karma. The Ishopanishad explains that the Lord sets aside a minimum quota of necessities for each living being. The secret to a peaceful life is to be content with this quota, not to perpetually strive for more and more material things than we need. And if, by our karma, we receive more than the minimum, the principle is to use that surplus in the service of the Lord. By such unselfish acts, one becomes free from the intricate web of karma.
This idea of contentment seems so countercultural in our modern world, which is built on generating endless desire. But it's not just about providing sustenance, is it? The chapter explains that Krishna's role as a well wisher goes much deeper. He also reveals himself to us.
Yes, this is the personal aspect. He reciprocates with our desire to know him. In Bhagavad Gita 4.11, he says, Ye yata mam prapadyante, tam stataiva bhajamyaham. This means, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. The relationship is not static. It's a dynamic, loving exchange. The more a devotee develops love for him and tries to serve him, the more Krishna reveals himself from within the heart.
This is why the book stresses that spiritual knowledge is not an academic process. You can't understand God simply by intellectual effort or by accumulating degrees.
Exactly. It is revealed truth. Krishna confirms this again in chapter 10, verse 10. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding, the buddhi yogam, by which they can come to me. This spiritual intelligence is a direct gift from the Lord to his sincere devotee. It comes from within because Krishna is seated in everyone's heart as the Paramatma, the Super Soul. From him come knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness.
So, connecting with this inner guide, the Super Soul, is key. And the method for that is humble service and submissive hearing. The text contrasts this sharply with academic knowledge, based on imperfect observation and speculation. It then presents another verse, Bhagavad Gita 4.39, which seems to bring it all together.
It does. It provides the formula. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. It begins with faith, shraddha. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. So the ingredients are faith, dedication, and sense control.
And to cultivate these qualities, the chapter recommends a practical, two-pronged approach.
Yes, the active principle of serving the Lord in whatever capacity we can, and the contemplative principle of chanting the holy mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process, performed with sincerity, is powerful enough to cleanse the heart of all material desires and replace them with pure spiritual ones.
That's a very practical framework, Prabhu. But for many of our listeners living busy modern lives, the idea of incorporating these principles might seem daunting. For instance, chanting a mantra might feel out of place in a fast paced, secular environment. What advice do you have for someone who wants to start but feels overwhelmed?
That's an excellent and very practical question, Chaitanya. It's true that the modern world presents unique challenges. The key is to start small and be consistent. No one is expected to renounce their responsibilities overnight. The process is about adding a spiritual dimension to your existing life, not necessarily subtracting material duties. For instance, chanting can be done silently. You can chant the Hare Krishna mantra in your mind while commuting to work, waiting in a line, or even during a quiet moment at your desk. The Lord is in your heart. He hears your silent chant just as clearly as a loud one. It's about the sincerity of the call.
The book then describes the result of this cleansing. The devotee finds satisfaction within and loses interest in selfish activities. It talks about a chain of desire that starts with the obsession for sexual pleasure, which is so prominent in materialistic life.
That's right. To become an attractive partner, one seeks wealth. With wealth comes the desire for distinction, nice clothes, fame, power, awards, and that can lead to a desire for adoration, to be worshipped like a celebrity or a powerful leader. This entire chain is rooted in gratifying the senses of this temporary body. Spiritual life requires controlling these impulses to find genuine peace and focus.
It's not about forceful repression, though, is it? The quote from the great saint Sri Yamunacharya is very telling. He says that after being engaged in Krishna's service and tasting a higher pleasure, the thought of sex pleasure becomes distasteful.
This is the key. It's about replacement, not just repression. We are pleasure-seeking beings. You cannot create a vacuum. The spiritual pleasure derived from devotional service is so vast and fulfilling that it makes material pleasure seem insignificant and hollow in comparison. This is the real test of spiritual realization. As Srila Prabhupada comments, a devotee can work with greater vigor without the motivation of sense pleasure, which he actively avoids.
So, Krishna, as our well wisher, blesses us with this higher taste. And as you mentioned earlier, his most tangible blessing is his spoken word, the Bhagavad Gita, which explains how to get free from the bodily conception of life.
Yes, and the chapter provides a beautiful and very important purport from Srila Prabhupada about how to approach the Gita. He outlines a clear path. It starts with a little faith. That faith prompts one to seek a devotee's association. Through that association, one studies the Gita and is placed in devotional service. This service dispels all misgivings about God. Once doubts are cleared, one becomes fixed, relishes the study, and eventually falls completely in love with Krishna. This highest stage transfers the soul back to the spiritual world, to an eternal life of bliss and knowledge.
It's a complete roadmap to perfection. To conclude, the chapter shares several verses from the fifth chapter of the Gita, where Krishna himself gives direct instructions on how to live a happy, liberated life.
Indeed, he says that an intelligent person doesn't delight in the miseries of sense contact because they are temporary. He says that one who can tolerate the force of desire and anger in this life is happy. And he defines a perfect mystic as one whose happiness is within, whose aim is inward. Such a person, free from dualities and doubts, and who works for the welfare of all beings, achieves liberation in the Supreme.
Prabhu, that's a very inspiring vision of liberation. But for many people listening, the idea of working for the welfare of all beings might seem like a monumental task, something reserved for great saints or leaders. How can an ordinary person, perhaps someone with a family and a demanding job, begin to practice this principle in a tangible, everyday way? Where does one start? So, to summarize, the path shown in this chapter is to recognize Krishna as our supreme well wisher, understand that he provides for us, and reciprocate with his love through service and hearing. This purifies our consciousness, allows us to taste a higher pleasure, and frees us from the endless and unsatisfying pursuit of temporary material happiness.
That is the essence of it. The cause of all our problems is simply forgetfulness of our eternal relationship with the Lord, and the solution is to reconnect with Him through these Krishna conscious activities. That is the state of true liberation. Harivilas Prabhu, thank you so much for this illuminating discussion.
The pleasure was all mine. Hare Krishna. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope you'll be with us next time as we continue our journey into the fourth dimension. Until then, stay well and stay conscious. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna and welcome everyone to our podcast. I'm your host Chaitanya, and today I have the great honor of being joined by Harivilas Prabhu, the author of the insightful book The Fourth Dimension. Welcome, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss these important topics.
Today, we'll be diving deep into chapter 7 of your book, titled The Power of Chanting the Holy Name. This chapter is incredibly potent. To start us off, could you elaborate on the opening idea that devotional service with one stroke can surpass all other spiritual processes?
Certainly. The Vedic scriptures describe many paths for spiritual enlightenment. Elaborate sacrifices, severe austerities, the cultivation of knowledge, the development of mystic powers. These are all valid, but they can be very difficult and time-consuming, especially in this current age. The beauty of devotional service, or bhakti yoga, is its directness. It is the special benediction of Lord Krishna. By simply engaging in service to the Supreme, one automatically achieves the results of all other processes. It's a direct connection to the source.
And you explain that this direct connection was made especially accessible by Lord Chaitanya 500 years ago. He introduced the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Can you speak on its significance?
Yes, Lord Chaitanya is described as the most magnanimous incarnation. He came specifically to give this Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The word mantra itself is significant. Man means mind, and tra means deliverance. So the Maha Mantra is the great chant for delivering the mind from the mire of material illusion. It purifies the entire consciousness and situates us in our true identity as eternal servants of Krishna, ultimately liberating us from the cycle of birth and death.
To explain the effects of this chanting, Lord Chaitanya gave a beautiful prayer, the Sikshashtakam, which begins Cheto Darpana Marjanam Bhava Maha Davagni Nirvapanam. Can you guide us through the meaning of this first verse?
Of course, the prayer begins, "Let there be all victory for the chanting of the holy name of Lord Krishna." And then it lists the sequential effect. The very first one is Cheto Dharpanamarjanam, which means cleansing the mirror of the heart. Our heart, or consciousness, is like a mirror. Over many, many lifetimes, it has become covered by the dust of material desires, lust, anger, greed, envy. This dust distorts our perception of reality. We can't see ourselves or the world clearly.
So, when we try to understand spiritual knowledge, like the Bhagavad Gita, it's like trying to see our reflection in a dirty mirror. The image is unclear.
Exactly. The chanting of Hare Krishna is the process for polishing that mirror. The sound vibration of the holy name directly cleanses away these layers of dust, allowing the pure consciousness to be revealed. It's a simple yet incredibly powerful process that accomplishes what would otherwise be a very arduous task.
This leads to a fascinating point you make in the book about different types of spiritual practitioners. Once the heart starts to become clean, our desires change. You quote a verse distinguishing a pure devotee from others. Could you explain the difference between a Nishkam devotee and the Karmis, Jhanis, and Yogis?
Yes, the verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ata Eva Shanta Bhukti Mukti Siddhikami Sakali Ashanta. This means that because a devotee of Krishna is Nishkama, or materially desireless, he is peaceful, or Shanta. On the other hand, the Karmis, who desire material enjoyment, the Jhanis, who desire liberation, and the Yogis, who desire mystic opulence, they are all Ashanta, not peaceful, because they are full of personal desires.
So, even the desire for liberation is considered a personal material desire.
From the platform of pure devotion, yes, because it is still a desire for oneself. The unique quality of a pure devotee is that their only desire is to please and serve Lord Krishna without any expectation of personal gain. Real desirelessness isn't having no desires. It's the desire to satisfy Krishna. This is why they are peaceful. They are not striving for anything for themselves, because they are fully confident in Krishna's protection. As Krishna promises Arjuna, Kunteya pratijanihi name bhaktah pranashyati. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes.
That's a profound shift in perspective. Let's move to the second advantage mentioned in Lord Chaitanya's prayer, Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam, or stopping the blazing fire of material existence. What is this fire and how does chanting extinguish it?
The Bhava Mahadavagni is the forest fire of repeated birth and death, fueled by lust. Lust, or the intense desire for sense gratification, is described as the eternal enemy of the soul. It burns like a fire that can never be satisfied by adding more fuel. The more we indulge, the more it burns. This fire keeps us trapped in the material world.
And the book stresses that a key component to extinguishing this fire is association, specifically the association of self realized devotees, or sadhus.
This is perhaps the most critical point. Chanting Hare Krishna is the method, but it is most effective when performed in the company of sincere devotees. The Srimad Bhagavatam states, Prasangam ajaram pasham, atmanah kavayo vidu, sa eva sadhusu krito, moksha dwaram apavritam. This means that attachment for material things is the greatest entanglement, but that very same attachment, when applied to self-realized devotees, opens the door to liberation.
Why is this association so vital?
Because without it, spiritual life remains theoretical. Srila Prabhupada explains in his commentary that without associating with devotees, we cannot understand that the absolute truth is a person, Krishna, with personal activities. We might stay stuck on an impersonal idea of God. But service, devotion, can only be offered to a person. In the association of devotees, we hear about Krishna. Our faith deepens, our attraction becomes fixed, and real devotional service begins. That association protects us from the fire of materialism and nourishes our spiritual life.
So the holy name cleanses the heart, and the association of devotees protects and nourishes it. This leads to the next stage described in the prayer, Shreyas Gaidava Chandrika Vitaranam, where the devotee's life becomes auspicious like the waxing moon.
Yes, the holy name is compared to the cooling, soothing rays of the moon. Just as the moon nourishes plant life, the holy name nourishes the devotee's heart. When this is combined with the moonshine of the Vaishnavas, or their mercy, something wonderful happens. The devotee begins to develop all good qualities.
The chapter lists 26 of these qualities. It's quite an amazing list.
It is. Qualities like being merciful, truthful, equal to all, faultless, magnanimous, clean, peaceful, and fully surrendered to Krishna. These aren't developed through some artificial external effort. They manifest naturally from within as a side effect of cleansing the heart and associating with pure souls. They are the symptoms of a person who is reawakening their original pure consciousness.
Prabhu, that is a beautiful explanation of how good qualities manifest. The prayer continues with Vidya Vadhu Jivanam, which translates to the life of all transcendental knowledge. This is a very poetic and profound phrase. How is the holy name the very life of knowledge? This has been incredibly illuminating, Prabhu. To summarize for our listeners, the process given by Lord Chaitanya is both simple and sublime. By chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, we begin by cleansing the long standing impurities from our heart. This process extinguishes the fire of material suffering and is supercharged by the association of devotees, which opens the door to liberation. As a result, one becomes desireless in the material sense, finds true peace, and develops all godly qualities.
That's a perfect summary. The power of the holy name is accessible to everyone, regardless of their background. It is the greatest benediction for this age, a direct path to re-establishing our lost relationship with Krishna.
Harivilas Prabhu, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom from the fourth dimension with us today. It's been a truly enlightening discussion.
The pleasure was all mine. Hare Krishna.
And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. Until next time, Hare Krishna, and welcome, dear listeners, to our continuing discussion on the profound book, The Fourth Dimension. I am your host, Chaitanya, and I am here once again with Harivilas Prabhu to delve deeper into the spiritual insights offered by the author Harivilas Das.
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya. It's a pleasure to be here. Today, we're exploring a truly pivotal chapter, Chapter 8, titled The Path to Liberation. This chapter lays out the essential qualities, understanding, and actions that guide a soul from material entanglement towards ultimate spiritual freedom. It's a roadmap, really, to our eternal home.
A roadmap is the perfect word for it. The chapter begins by drawing a very clear and powerful distinction between a person in material consciousness and one who has developed pure devotion. It quotes a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam 5.18.12, which is quite striking. Prabhu, could you unpack the meaning of this verse for us?
Certainly. The verse states, Yasya asti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana, sarvair gunais tatra samasate suraha. It means that one who has unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Lord, Vasudeva, manifests all the exalted qualities of the demigods, such as religion, knowledge, and renunciation. It's a profound statement. It suggests that goodness is not something we artificially cultivate in a vacuum. It is the natural consequence of connecting to the source of all goodness, Krishna. On the other hand, the verse says of a non-devotee, harav abhaktasya kuto mahadguna, meaning, how can there be any good qualities in such a man? Even if he is a good family man or a mystic yogi, he is ultimately manoratenas asati davato bahi, meaning driven by his own mental speculations and serving the external energy. So any goodness is superficial and temporary, lacking a real spiritual foundation.
That's a very challenging idea for the modern mind. We tend to judge people as good based on their external actions, charity, honesty, kindness. But this verse asks us to look deeper at the underlying consciousness. Is the action motivated by a desire to please the Supreme or by our own mental concoctions of what is right and wrong, which are ultimately aimed at our own gain or safety?
Exactly. The analogy is like watering a tree. If you water the root, the entire tree, the trunk, branches, leaves, and flowers, is automatically nourished. The root is Krishna. Devotional service is the watering process. When we serve the root, all good qualities naturally blossom in us. Trying to cultivate good qualities without connecting to Krishna is like trying to water each leaf individually. It's artificial and ultimately ineffective.
So, this pure devotee, free from contamination, achieves a state of spiritual happiness and steady intelligence. This leads directly to the next theme in the chapter, the concept of akarma or inaction from the Bhagavad Gita, verse 4.18. It says, one who sees inaction, and action in inaction is intelligent among men. This sounds like a riddle. What does it mean?
It is a profound spiritual paradox. Akarma means work that carries no karmic reaction. The impersonalists, fearing karma, may try to cease all activity, but that is not the path of bhakti. A devotee sees inaction in action. This means that although a devotee is engaged in all sorts of activities, because those activities are performed for the pleasure of Krishna without any desire for personal sense gratification, they produce no binding reaction. The action is performed, but it doesn't create karma. Conversely, one sees action in inaction. This refers to someone who may be outwardly inactive, perhaps sitting silently, but whose mind is internally working, planning, and desiring fruitive results. That mental activity is still karma. So, intelligence lies in understanding that it's the consciousness behind the act, not the act itself, that binds us.
So, one person can be typing at a computer for their own profit and be deeply entangled in karma, while another person can be typing at a computer to write an article glorifying Krishna and be completely free, performing a karma. The external activity is identical, but the internal state is worlds apart.
Precisely. Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport that a devotee acts from a sense of eternal servitorship to Krishna. This consciousness makes one immune to the reactions of work. This is real freedom, to be fully active and engaged in this world, but for a higher, transcendental purpose that liberates rather than entangles.
This kind of action requires true knowledge, and the chapter then transitions to define what real knowledge is through the lens of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13. Lord Krishna enumerates 20 points and declares that anything besides these is ignorance.
Yes, and these points are qualities, not just academic information. They include things like humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, cleanliness, steadiness, and self-control. These are the symptoms that a person is actually educated in the spiritual sense. The chapter points out that modern education, focused on material happiness through eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, is considered abject ignorance from this perspective, because it ignores the true purpose of human life. It simply glorifies the same activities that animals perform.
Among those 20 points of knowledge, the text highlights one as the crucial initial step, approaching a bona fide spiritual master. Why is this considered so fundamental?
Because this transcendental knowledge is not something we can figure out on our own through mental speculation. It must be received through a disciplic succession. The chapter beautifully outlines 3 types of spiritual masters. The Vartma Pradakshina Guru is the person who first introduces you to the path. The Shiksha Guru is one or more persons who give you ongoing spiritual instruction. And the Diksha Guru is the one who formally initiates the disciple and accepts responsibility for guiding them back to Godhead. Without the guidance of these spiritual masters, the scriptures can be easily misunderstood. The Guru provides the context, the practical application, and the living example. By serving and learning from a genuine Guru, the other 19 qualities of knowledge manifest naturally in a sincere disciple.
This brings us to the final and perhaps the most moving theme of the chapter: the sacrifice and mercy of the devotees who take on this role of sharing spiritual knowledge. The text states that devotees engage in the difficult task of approaching even the most fallen persons to give them a chance to hear about the Lord.
Yes, it quotes a powerful purport from Bhagavad Gita 11:55, where Srila Prabhupada explains that a devotee of Krishna is nirvaira. He has no enemies. Why? because the devotee has personal experience that Krishna consciousness is the only remedy for all of life's problems. Out of compassion, he wants to share this with everyone. This is the highest form of welfare work.
The text gives the examples of Lord Jesus Christ who was crucified, and in India, Thakur Haridas and Prahlad Maharaja who endured immense persecution. They risked everything because they were so convinced of the benefit they were offering society. It's truly humbling to consider that level of compassion.
It is, and this is the mercy of Krishna acting through his devotee. The devotee knows that suffering is simply due to forgetfulness of our eternal relationship with Krishna. So they go to public places chanting Hare Krishna and distributing books, knowing that perhaps only 25% of people in this age are even interested. But they do it to seek out that 25% and to give everyone else the chance to hear the holy names, planting a spiritual seed that can one day fructify. This risk, this selfless service, is what pleases Krishna the most.
So, as we conclude our discussion on this chapter, The Path to Liberation, let's try to summarize the key takeaways. It seems the path is not a passive one, but a very dynamic and conscious journey.
Indeed. I would say there are four main pillars. First, that true virtue and good qualities are the natural result of pure devotion, not just external moralism. Second, freedom from karma is achieved not by ceasing action, but by dedicating all our actions to Krishna, the principle of akarma. Third, that real knowledge is not academic learning, but the cultivation of 20 spiritual qualities, which begins by humbly approaching a bona fide spiritual master. And fourth, the culmination of this path is compassion in action, becoming an instrument of the Lord's mercy by sharing this liberating knowledge with others, even at personal sacrifice.
A wonderful summary. It shows that the path to liberation is not a selfish endeavor for one's own salvation, but a journey that transforms us into selfless instruments for the salvation of all living beings. It's a path of love, wisdom, and compassionate action.
That is the essence of it. That is the highest perfection. Thank you for this enlightening discussion, Chaitanya. And thank you to all our listeners for joining us. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We hope you'll join us next time as we continue our exploration of the fourth dimension. Until then, we wish you all the best on your own path to liberation.